All right, I hope it's in progress. I'm here to record. Welcome to What If No One Answered the Call here on JLJ Media. I am James Law Jr. As you guys know, I always answer the call. But on this show, we're talking to people who answer the call in various ways. And this person has two sides of the coin of this one. So she is an advocate for caregivers, end-of-life patients, their families. I'm sure any professionals, I'm sure, that are involved in any kind of hospice. We did a show on death doulas.
Mhm.
There's a whole thing. And as you know, and as you guys know at home, I'm a former geriatric nurse. We're going to talk about it because she had stuff happen legally to her, and we talk about her experience. Let's get to know her. She has just a beautiful smile. Miss Rachel Waters. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, how are you?
I am fine. How are you?
I'm doing much better than I was, a few months ago. So I always tell people that this is the hopeful part of the story where we can get to share information and hopefully help others who might find themselves you know, in one of the positions I was in, but hopefully not all. At least that's what we're trying to prevent.
Yes, I mean, just and how, I mean, just we're gonna get into it, but I just want to say just openly, it must have been so crazy how quickly things can turn for you when you're
Yes.
in a certain situation, and then suddenly it's been switched, and you're
Yes.
faced where it's like they're saying they're pointing fingers at you. When you look back on that, I mean, what do you think?
So I think that when I look back on it, there are a lot of thoughts that I have. A lot of it is anger, confusion. There are still questions that, we are seeking answers to even now. But I think that probably the most resounding thought I've had, aside from, how it had impacted my grief and my life in so many ways, is that if it was going to happen to anyone, I was probably the best person for something like this to happen to. Um, Especially considering how many people, once they are under legal scrutiny in the criminal legal system, the odds of being able to gather evidence, demonstrate that evidence, gather a defense team, even afford a defense team, or even have evidence, right, that would help bolster their own case. Those are vanishingly small. Many people, they'll just get picked up by law enforcement. They'll be, in a whirlwind of confusion and grief, especially if they are being charged with the death of a loved one. We see this sometimes with parents who've lost children to things like sudden infant death syndrome or tragedy like a house fire. Um, and sometimes it happens to people, I guess, like me, who lose their parents to a really brutal set of diseases at end of life. But many times those people are not as lucky as I was, because it's not like you get a courtesy call when you find out that you've been charged with murder. You're just picked up one day and you're put in a cell, and you hope that you can find a criminal defense team, or you take a public defender. And even then, you don't have access to your laptop, your phone, or anything that you might have evidence on. And I was very lucky that, I had known I was a suspect for some time. Um, and I had been gathering evidence that I knew I might need in the future. And I had gathered evidence before because I had a lot of concerns about my mom's care toward the end of her life. So I had a lot, going for me when that charge came down, as well as the fact that someone tipped me off on Instagram. So I was able to secure a legal team and make arrangements to turn myself in, which really dramatically improves a chances person of making bond and being able to be released, which means you have the freedom to present your evidence to the authorities and hopefully avoid something like a trial, which is super traumatic, especially for someone who has not committed a crime, right? But it's also traumatic for families and anybody who has to testify. So, because I was in that position, because I'm very legally and medically knowledgeable, and I had all of that evidence, I tell people I was the best person for it to happen to, as well as the fact that I have a long history in communications. I've worked in nonprofit with the criminal legal system. And I'm a medical and science writer, or at least I was before I lost my career. with these charges. And if it was going to happen to someone, it's great for it to happen to somebody who doesn't have a criminal record, who already has public trust, and who has the sort of, unfortunate to say, privilege that it takes to be taken seriously. Because many people who are falsely accused, they don't have those things going for them. And so I feel that there's an obligation to speak out if you have that going for you.
Yeah. Wow. I know. I like, so we're gonna start from the beginning. So,
Yeah.
also people know this is not, I'm not doing this show for sensationalism and like that.
Nope.
This is to help others if you find yourself in a similar situation. Maybe this will help you understand. I think, or those who just don't know and are like, wow, this is a cautionary tale. I need to look out for. So anyway, it's not a sensational story. We want to tell the story. So no, I'm very sensitive about it. So number one, I'm sorry for loss of your mother. I don't know if anybody told you
Thank
that.
you.
Sorry for loss of your mother.
Yeah,
That's a hard
it's
loss.
good to hear, because it's you have people tell you that, but if you have the state and other people basically calling you a killer, it's very hard to process those condolences.
Yeah, but I'm just going to hand that to you. I think you deserve that.
Thank you.
Number two, your bravery telling the story is just extraordinary also. So let's start from the beginning. You're bopping along, living your life like it's golden. And with your mother? So what was the first things that happened to her medically? Let's start there.
Oh my goodness. So, to put it in a nutshell, my mom had been uh chugging along, moving into her 70s, with everyone in the family expecting her to be the person most likely to live to 100. My mom was super health conscious. Um, she was spry and brilliant. She looked 20 years younger than her age, which was ridiculous. And I had this even in 2019, which was the year before her, cognitive decline was diagnosed, because it wasn't diagnosed as full-blown Alzheimer's just yet. Uh, she was still very much my mom, doing everyone in the family's taxes, very capable. We were in contact pretty much daily on the phone, saw her 4 times a year, would come down there for holidays. She would come to New York. My mom and I were very close all my life.
Mhm.
But that all changed when 2020 came and the pandemic hit. And we went the longest we had ever gone without seeing each other. So I had last seen her in January of 2020, and she was still cognitively and physically normal as far as anyone could tell. And then over the course of the lockdown, I started to notice progressive difficulty in her ability to like carry on a conversation or to have send text messages that made sense. They were getting progressively more garbled in terms of her grammar and her wording. And I knew from a 23andMe test that we had taken a few years prior that we both had the ApoE4 Alzheimer's gene. And as someone who is very medically knowledgeable and has that science background, I had a gut feeling that's what was happening. And so I immediately made arrangements, my husband and I, to get down there and see her as soon as we could. We got down in August of 2020. And when we arrived, it looked like she had aged 20 years and 8 months. She had lost a huge amount of weight. Her spinal column had collapsed from severe osteoporosis and probably the beginnings of multiple myeloma then. We didn't realize it at the time, but it certainly accelerated the bone deterioration in her spine. Um, and everything about her was suddenly geriatric. We're talking about someone who everybody thought was like in their 50s before.
Mhm.
And I immediately jumped into action to get her in, get her in with a geriatrician who could diagnose the MCI, which she did. And I told her about the genetic predisposition, and also get her on some reclass for her osteoporosis and start doing what we could to at least slow this progression as quickly as we could. Unfortunately, my mom was an unusually fast progressor. It was probably complicated by the fact that she had the osteoporosis and then developing multiple myeloma, being diagnosed in 2022. And so that was how it all started, was that, really just a little bit off in terms of her communication that just got progressively worse. But it was a lot of things that went wrong all at once, with both her brain and body that sort of accelerated the process.
So, folks, why I want to stop there for a second, just my 2 cents. Same thing. My stepdad was ex-Army, Navy, police cop for years. Was in his 80s doing. I mean, again, looking young. And everything you're saying, I'm like, oh my God, it's
Right.
the exact same thing. And then one day, I was noticing he wasn't recognizing my daughter, or what they happened for my
Mm.
daughter. He looked at her like blank. And she's like, Papa Moses, it's me, blah, blah. She noticed it too. And then, but then like he snapped out of it or something. It was like, oh yeah, and Tammy, hugged, whatever. And then it happened to my sister once, like a few months later. So I just want to say, what Rachel's talking about is if it doesn't matter. I said I'd rather ask for forgiveness later. If I notice something's
Yeah,
off, right? Jump in. You
that's
said
right.
I got to put eyes on her. That's what you said. I'm not saying you said that, but you were like, I got to look at her and get down there
Yeah.
and see what's going on. And I think trust your gut. Now,
Yeah.
we're saying we're medical, we know medical stuff, but you don't have to be a medical professional. If your gut's
No,
telling you, mom,
something's wrong.
yeah, right. So aren't you glad you went down there?
I am very glad we went down there, but that was also when I think a lot of the complications began with caregiving too. Because the thing with dementia, especially when you have other family members who are getting older, in this case, her siblings, there's a lot of denial. Fear of their own mortality, fear that they're going to be, potentially saddled with some responsibility for her, especially since her sister, my aunt, lived next door and was the person closest. And also some suspicion, like, Rachel, why is she barging in here from New York and wanting to get things like power of attorney? And, is she trying to have her mom declared incompetent or, seize her inheritance early? There was a lot of suspicion, I think, arises when something's terribly wrong and you raise that flag. Unfortunately, I'd really hoped that we would kind of have a team effort. I had even arranged like meetings with the Alzheimer's Association and everything and Zoom calls, but I think that uh you know it was a case of them really feeling that care should go a certain direction, and me feeling that we need to have her with the best specialists, the best medications. And a lot of my family expressed a lot of concern and suspicion over a lot of the new medications, especially Alzheimer's medications. And we started running into issues with cooperation and help from the family that we really relied on to, maybe take her medical, not maybe, to take her to medical appointments and to provide her with social stimulation. And my mom was really heavily dependent on them. So I had to walk this very fine line between, you know, not making them so angry that they were unwilling to interact with her, which was certainly a threat that was wielded, while also trying to ensure she got the best medication, the best care, and we could slow the process. But they would even, want me to, especially my aunt, she wouldn't even, help with my mom if I didn't bring her to doctors that she approved of. So it was a very difficult process that I think is not unfamiliar to people, especially only children who come in as a caregiver, because everybody who is close to and or loves that person often will think they know best, and it can really spark a lot of really intense conflict. And that was, one of the hardships we faced early in.
So, folks, I'll stop there again. Chew, yes, everything she's saying is happens. I noticed when you spoke to the siblings of our parents or grandparents, whatever you're in, and those generations above us, I would say the greatest generations, the baby boomers, like they're very much they just believe a certain way, and
Yeah,
some of it's cultural, some of it's just in their minds. Denial is a big thing because
it
if
is.
they're deteriorating, then they feel like, what about me? My
That's
sister.
right.
Like, oh my God, am I is it me too? So a lot comes up. So again, I just try to transfer all the strength to you guys out there who are about to enter this or who are entering it. I am very fortunate. My siblings and I are all in agreement. Most all the time we're in agreement. So but I know how rare that's actually more often not the case.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah, you're often on your own if you are the designated person that has all of the legal responsibility too. And as my mom's power of attorney and medical power of attorney, durable and only child, I at the end of the day, all the decisions around her care had to rest with me. And so I had to be the bad guy a lot of times with the family, you know, saying, no, she does need antibiotics for this, or no, we're not going to get her on a bunch of tramadol while she's at home alone, you know? Um, there was you have to make a lot of tough calls, and there's an immense burden of responsibility, especially as your parent is losing that cognitive ability to advocate and make decisions for themselves. And you have to approach it so thoughtfully and with so much care, and you feel like you're walking a tightrope the entire time.
That's very true. I'm here right now, so I understand. Okay. So mom's getting progressively worse. You're putting into place what's going on. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be really carefully into this part because I kind of want I want to lead into how you're taking care of your mom.
Yeah.
You feel you're taking care of your mom. You're doing the do, being a good daughter, right? From New York, coming down to do it, to the beginning of where, of your story of where it starts to go a little south.
Sure. So I think it's important to start with before it where it starts to go south in terms of where we know we were marching toward the end of her life. And that was when she failed therapy. She was on monoclonal antibody therapy for multiple myeloma, and she failed that in December of 2022. And at that point, her oncologist said, I don't think she's got another year. She may not even have another 6 months. We should consider hospice.
Okay.
And with Alzheimer's, especially, you don't want to put someone through the trauma of constantly being in and out of the hospital and having these, traumatic and terrifying life-saving measures coming in when the quality of life is continually deteriorating. You want to focus on their comfort. And I
Yeah.
was really familiar with home hospice and how it worked, and felt that that would be the best option for
So
her. And that
you
was something the
wait, so
family all agreed on too, right?
for a second, so you because there's different kinds of hospice folks out there. You chose the home hospice option.
That's right. Chose the home hospice option. And my mom was still living in her house at the time when she went on it. And of course, as part of home hospice, most places in the country, when a loved one goes into home hospice, their caregivers are prescribed something called either a comfort care kit, an emergency kit, also known as an e-kit, and those contain things like sublingual morphine, lorazepam or other benzodiazepines for distress. That morphine is indicated for pain and respiratory distress at end of life, right? Suppositories for constipation. You are the one who will be expected to give these in the event there is not a nurse available to administer them. And so you are trained on their proper use. You don't think anything of it because that is just what happens across the country. And in fact, you may even think that you're legally protected when you are prescribed these things.
Please tell us. Let's get into that.
And
Yeah.
and no one ever tells you otherwise.
Okay.
It's just a norm, right? And so at the time, I did not know that that was sort of the beginning of my nightmare, right? That was probably when it really began because I'm not really thinking anything of it.
Oh,
So my mom continues along in home care, and we are hiring more and more in-home caregivers to help manage her. So one of the promises I made to my mom was to keep her in home as long as possible. Unfortunately, by the time February of 2023 rolled around, so just a couple of months in, my mom experienced another huge decline in function, and it became really apparent to us that it was no longer safe for her to be in the home, in part because she was feeling that caregivers in her home were a threat to her, and she started threatening their lives and kicking them out
that happens.
repeatedly.
Yep.
And if it was us providing round the clock care, especially if it was me, she had a very hard time accepting it because she still remembered me as her daughter and she didn't want her daughter changing her diapers.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of so she needed a caregiver because she would respond well to a professional, but she would have those moments of, who the hell are you in my house? I'm going to kill you if you don't get out. And we
Yes.
realized the time had come for a memory care facility.
Okay.
Now, memory care facilities are, little do most people know, they are not medical facilities. They are residences.
That
So
makes sense.
when you move your loved one into a memory care facility, you're still on home hospice. So no one comes and says, oh, we're taking the e-kit doesn't apply or that comfort care kit doesn't apply. Nothing actually changes in terms of your rights as a caregiver. Memory care facilities might have their own rules to protect staff and other residents, but those are different from the law. Again, I am not thinking of the comfort care kit at this time because my mom's just moving to a different residence and she doesn't have any impending signs of death just yet. She's just progressively getting sicker and losing weight.
Yeah.
So she moves into the memory care facility. She stays on her home hospice and she's getting supportive care there. And she begins to deteriorate pretty rapidly for myriad reasons. One of them being she's essentially no longer eating. Um, in part because like her kyphotic posture, it was making her stomach really small. And, there was a lot of indication that my mom really was not that interested in living anymore, in part because she had immense pain from the lesions of multiple myeloma. And so we were always fighting this battle, I think, between what's the right balance between pain management and behavioral management, because those things often fuse when they're in pain. People often with dementia, they will lash out, they'll threaten to kill people. That
Mhm.
happened a lot in the memory care facility. And so it was a lot of battle between what's the right balance. And there was some disagreement too between like, does she need more pain medication or does she need antipsychotics, which aren't necessarily well indicated for people with dementia.
Right.
And they won't either solve the problem either necessarily.
Right.
Some respond well, some don't. It's a case by case basis.
Right.
So my mom gets
Before you start, so I just want to really understand. You're moving along as I'm trying to care for my mother. I really
right.
want to emphasize this so heavily because once you're in, any caregiver knows out there, once you're in it. So
Yes,
you're just like, I mean, you're just like, it sounds to me like you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, and you're just like handling everything going on. Okay, so now we can sit next to now. Please continue. I just want to make sure, like you just keep
that's fine.
you
Yeah,
keep popping along, thinking you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
that's right.
So anyway,
And so she's in memory care, and I've even hired outside caregivers to help keep an eye on her
okay,
and help manage her behaviors, because they'll have more time to dedicate to her and be patient. And that was also one of the demands of the memory care facility. But I continued to hire the caregivers beyond the demands because they had alleged that my mom had attempted suicide.
okay.
I'm not confident of,
He's gonna land. So I'm like, she don't think that's what I
how cognitively capable someone with advanced dementia is of like
yeah,
going through that thought process. But my mom would certainly yell threats like that, saying I'm going to kill myself. But that's a thing that,
normal.
if people are in a lot of pain, they might say.
Yep.
And, she took trips to Jerry Psych, unfortunately, that just left her very confused, very afraid. And they evaluated there that she was not a suicide risk.
Okay.
Um, but we eventually got to the point where she was deteriorating really rapidly. I had seen her before her death or before I got the call that she was dying, I had last seen her at the end of June. And, her posture was she was completely bent in half at that point. Um, she was in a lot of pain, sort of alternating with good spirits because my mom was fundamentally a very bright and sunny person.
Okay.
She still remembered me. She was still the type of person who would compliment, a worker in the facility on their hair or their outfit. She was always, a very optimistic and lively person, even when she was in the worst pain.
Yeah.
And it became increasingly clear she was starting to develop edema. Hospice had some concerns that maybe we were starting to see the signs of organ failure.
Okay.
Um, and then on July 9th, I got a phone call from a hospice worker who was at the facility that my mom had been found doubled over and non-responsive with an oxygen saturation in the 70s, and that her fingers and toes were turning black and she was actively dying. And I needed to get down immediately because she had, quote, hours to days left to live.
Okay.
So my husband and I immediately arranged to get to Georgia. I promised my mom she was not going to die alone, and I was determined, come hell or high water, to keep that promise.
Yeah.
All the flights were canceled out of New York because there was a huge storm. So we had to take a train and then a plane, train to DC, then a plane to Augusta, Georgia. We arrived there on the 10th and we immediately set up camp in my mom's room. And when we got there, one of the first things we asked was, do we have morphine scheduled for her here at the facility? Because that's sort of standard of care at end of life. And I was aware of that.
Yes, it
And they
is.
said, no, we don't think she really needs it. And I had some concerns. So hospice had responded, it's not the memory care facility that's responsible for that. Um, Hospice responded, we don't really, the nurse from hospice said, well, we don't think she needs it. She seems comfortable. And I said, well, you know, you're seeing her for a few minutes, but every time she's turned, the only response my mom had was this agonized grimace every time she was turned in the bed. She could not speak. Her eyes were fixed open. She'd already been without food or fluids for more than a day, and they were beginning to desiccate or dry out. She had not been urinating and defecating. Um, and she had two large ulcers on her flank and buttocks. They were either Kennedy ulcers or bed sores. We do not know. But she was in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And I was very strongly advocating for morphine to be prescribed to the facility so we could address that pain, knowing that she was in the final stages of her life.
Right.
Since we were not able to secure that prescription as soon as I would like, my first thought is, oh, this is what the e-kit, the comfort care kit is for. So we can have that on hand in case we don't get this prescription called in time to the facility. Now, we knew I had already checked the laws around emergency medications in memory care facilities, and I knew that there's no law that forbids family members from having them or administering them. It's simply they can't be out where other patients can access it. So my husband went to the house, grabbed the comfort care kit and kept it in the car just in case we needed to run out and grab it.
Okay.
My mom continued to progress by the day, still non-responsive and fading more and more, skin getting progressively waxier and more yellow.
Yeah.
And it was increasingly clear that she was entering the final stages because she was beginning to experience the agonal breathing where you have the jutting jaw. And in fact, that was the sound that awakened me and my husband up the morning of July 12th. I heard her teeth smashing together in an effort to get those final agonal breaths. And my first thought is, oh my God, this is exactly what the comfort kit is prescribed for.
Right.
This is what morphine is for.
Right.
And at this point, I'm checking to see if the facility has it. They still don't. And I said, I have my comfort care kit from hospice. I'm going to call and get instruction for that. And so I can administer it because no one in the facility is allowed to administer it, right? They don't have the orders from the facility itself. And so I was the only person who was actually qualified in that moment. And I called hospice to seek further instruction. My mom got the appropriate dose, the single dose of morphine, but she died around 15 minutes later with really no change in her breathing or agonal distress. And it was horrifying and traumatic to watch that kind of death, but it was also, it didn't seem out of the ordinary because that was what we were expecting and what we had been told to expect. Hospice, in fact, came and declared her, they dressed her, and everything seemed normal. We had called the funeral home, which had been expecting a call.
Let's stop there for a second. Again, I want folks to really grasp how normal all this is. And you're following all the things that one would do. Many of you at home probably have gone through this and think, oh, what she's saying is fine. Everything is fine. It's so far, Rachel's doing what she's supposed to be doing. And now mom is passed. So now the part she is passed. And now you're going to do the aftercare. Now it's time to do the normal stuff you would do while you're grieving the loss of your mom.
That's right.
And you were there.
Yes.
So it's a little different than, I'm sorry, folks, it's a little different to be when someone passes It's a very profound experience. I've been,
It is.
I've done it. But also when you're not there, not saying this is still hurt, this is a different kind of hurt, but you were there. So now you're going to do the act. Now you're going to do the shebang that you would do if someone passes. Please continue.
That's right. And so the funeral home knew that my mom was dying because they were one of the first people we, contacted when we've been told she was imminently dying because we want to see what dates might be open in the coming weeks or however long it would
Of course,
take.
of course, of course.
And the funeral home couldn't pick my mom up until later in the day. So they told us to go ahead and go home and rest. So we went back to my mom's house or headed back to my mom's house. And on the way back, the funeral home calls and says, there's been a problem. We can't pick up your mom's body because it's been taken to Atlanta for an investigation.
Okay, let's stop there. It's like,
That's right.
okay, so your mother just died. You just left her. She just died. She's died. So now you're trying to figure out how to get her picked up like normal people would do.
Right.
And you're getting this phone call. What was the first thing that went through your head? If you can remember, first thing went through your head.
Oh my God, someone accused me of murder
You went there. Oh, you went there immediately. Oh,
immediately. And my fear was that because I knew that there was probably some confusion among staff because there wasn't morphine at the facility. And I had thought that I had avoided confusion by announcing it and having
yeah.
the prescription on hand.
Yeah.
But you know that when there's a potential for a miscommunication, especially around matters of life and death, my assumption was that there had just been some mistake,
Okay.
right? And that someone who was very concerned there maybe thought that there was foul play.
Okay.
Now, do I know if someone said, oh my God, she killed her mom outright? But the fear, you have to go to the worst case so you can protect yourself, right? You
Yeah.
know that there's definitely a murder investigation because that is the only reason they're going to be taking your loved one's body away.
Okay. Yeah.
And I immediately sought the counsel of an attorney in the area to tell him my suspicion and to see if he agreed with me. He
Okay.
unfortunately did. And in Georgia,
Okay.
Georgia also has felony murder on the books. And so there was suddenly this fear of, oh my God, did I break a law, by having a comfort care kit in a facility that I didn't know I'd broken? And
Okay.
so I am panicking at this point, Googling the laws and trying to understand if something happened that I was not aware of.
Okay.
Couldn't find anything to that effect, but the attorney said, listen, they don't know anything about hospice law or any of this nuanced stuff. All I can tell you is that you've probably been accused of manslaughter at the very least, if not felony murder, and you need to expect contact from law enforcement at any minute. And
Okay.
sure enough,
No, I really, this is like, it's such a fantastical story. I want to get a chance to ask you these questions. I'm I know fans thinking the same thing.
yeah,
Again, I can't just say this enough. You're grieving the loss of your mother. She just died. And so now this layer out of nowhere is blanketing all of that and saying, okay, you might be accused of murder, and the law enforcement are coming at any time for you.
that's right.
I mean, like they could be like around the corner, out the back, over here, go home. Like you have no
That's
idea.
right.
So do you panic? Do you,
Oh, I'm terrified. So immediately you go into what I call machine mode,
yeah,
where your life is now potentially on the line,
yeah,
right? Um, and this is coming from someone who, again, I am intimately familiar with the criminal legal system because I worked in criminal legal reform. And I know how scary those systems are,
yes,
and that, you know, I am now in a situation where I have to be very, very thoughtful and careful about every single thing I do. And grief flies out the window because now you're going to fight for your own life. And it's very hard to process it, but you just have to do it.
you have to.
And
Oh,
sure enough, as soon as we get back within about 20 minutes, Columbia County investigators, plainclothes, knocked on the door. There are 4 other police cars in the yard. They came asking for my cell phone, and I said, knowing my rights, I said, you can get a search warrant. And also, this is my attorney. You can speak to him directly. So they went ahead and got that search warrant. It took a few hours, and they also spoke to my attorney. When they came back with the search warrant, it had my name and the words homicide on it. And I knew then I was officially a murder suspect in the state of Georgia.
That okay, stop there. Oh my God. I don't I don't even know. I mean, oh my God. The fact you're sitting here talking about it just I mean like I mean I'm thinking there must be anger, fear,
Oh,
so sad,
terror, terror,
terror.
terror and anger because you don't know the extent of the accusation or the claim. You don't know you don't know what the hell is going on. You were just called down here a few days ago because she was dying. And you're like, why am I being, why am I being scrutinized as
Right.
though a crime has occurred when there's no crime at all, as far as any of us are aware, right?
Oh my God.
And as we would later turn out, there was no crime whatsoever.
Right.
Um, and that's where we'll talk a little later
Yeah.
about the weird gray zone of the law that, I found myself having slipped into.
Okay,
Um,
so you're getting picked up.
So no one picked no. So at that point, I'm just a suspect, and
Just
it's an investigation. And
okay.
so after they've taken my phone and the morphine from the e-kit because my attorney had told them everything that happened, right? In the way an attorney would. I didn't hear that conversation, but when they came back with the warrant included, and I'm like, okay, so they're going to see it's a prescription as part of an e-kit. So I was relieved, right? And I was also relieved when they took my phone because if you went through my phone, you'd see like I was called down because she was dying. I have the photos and videos of her
Right, right,
dying.
right, right.
I have photos and I had videos of conversations with the hospice nurse as she was dying. So I'm thinking, all right, I have everything that I'm handing over is exculpatory or what we would call evidence to innocence, right?
Yes.
That would demonstrate there was no crime. So I'm holding on to this hope that it's all just a misunderstanding and that they're going to see that nothing untoward took place. And so I waited. I went back to New York. I could not move forward with my mom's estate, right? Because once you're a suspect, you can't really go through probate. You're
Oh,
not going to get life insurance.
oh my God.
Um, None of that's going to happen. And at the same time, my mom's side of the family just stops talking to me. I did
Oh,
not know at the time that law enforcement had already made contact with them. And so
oh my God.
I have this compound grief of my mom is dead. I'm being scrutinized for a murder that didn't happen. And I've lost all the family that remember her from when she still had her memories intact and that I could go through that grieving process with. And it is devastating and overwhelming,
Yes.
but overwhelmingly silent for a year and a half.
Wait, wait,
And
wait. Okay, wait a minute. So from okay, did the investigation last year and a half?
a year and a half. Now, there wasn't much, it seemed, that was very active during that year and a half. And the GBI was backed up at the time doing autopsies and toxicology. And I was told at the time it could take anywhere from like a year for toxicology to get back. So essentially, I was urged to have patience throughout this process. And all this while, I am thinking, okay, once they have everything back, I will be cleared. I'll hopefully be able to get a death certificate because I was also looking for answers as to when my mom was found, who found her, what condition she was in. And at the same time, over this year and a half, I am, filing demand letters with the facility to get all the medical records and all of their notes leading up to her death. And these were not things that they handed over to me on their own accord, even though I requested it and was legally entitled to it as her durable power of attorney, and general power of attorney, and medical power of attorney after her death. So the demand letter came through. I got all of those records. And then when I read the record from hospice, I knew something was terribly wrong because that hospice nurse who I'd asked for morphine, uh, she charted that I had requested euthanasia, and that was not accurate. And so I began to get an idea of the scope potentially of how law enforcement came to believe that I had murdered my mom. At the time, that was the only clue I had, but I very distinctly remember that was sort of my blood running cold moment. The
Yeah.
idea that a medical professional had alleged that I had inquired about euthanasia when I had not. My mom was already dying, first of all, and second of all, it's
Right.
illegal, and third of all, I
Yeah.
had, like, there's
Yeah.
so many reasons
Right.
why you
Yeah.
would not inquire about that, especially since they're already dying.
Right.
Um, but I had a sense then that I was not going to get out of this without a fight.
Right.
And it's easy to fall into this normalcy bias where you kind of just keep living your life.
Right.
But sure enough, a year later, in February of 2025 of this year, just days before my 42nd birthday, I made a post memorializing my mom and the last birthday gift she'd ever given me. And someone posted on my Instagram, "Why have you been indicted for murdering your mother? Shame on you. This is why your family disowned you." And then they posted a copy of an indictment with a number, my name, and 2 counts of murder in the state of Georgia, felony murder and malice murder, both of which are subject to the possibility of the death penalty.
So
I
when you see that,
I saw it on my Instagram. That I thought maybe I was hallucinating at first. It did not
right.
feel real. I
Right.
sent the screenshot to my attorney and I said, "Is this real? Am I about to be arrested?" And he texted back and said, "Yes, it's real. You've had a warrant for your arrest for, over 2 weeks now. You need to
Right.
immediately make arrangements to turn yourself in so you can hopefully negotiate bond.
Yeah.
And, you need the best criminal attorney that, who would I would want to advise me in this matter and take my case if this happened to me, and that's Brian Steele." And I was like, wait a minute, Brian Steele of Young Thug fame, now of P. Diddy fame. I was
Yeah.
like, he's not going to take me. This guy's like a millionaire famous
Right.
people attorney. I
Right.
can't afford this guy. And he said, no, he will take your case. I've already talked to him.
Wow.
And immediately within like an hour, I was on the phone with Brian, and I had some hope then, given his degree of expertise and how confident he was, that we could, move through this and hopefully be able to demonstrate the evidence that I had
Right.
uh, to both the medical examiner and the DA. But first, we had to go through the process of me being driven down to Georgia like a fugitive, because I was a fugitive, can't fly once there's a
Right.
warrant for your arrest,
Right.
and to turn myself in on the day of my bond hearing. And so I had my own taste of incarceration for 12 hours in medium security.
So what is that? What is that? I've never been arrested. So I've been close, but I've never been arrested. What is that like to be suddenly locked, stripped, and locked up in a cold cell?
It is, it's a profoundly dehumanizing experience just by design, right? And the layers of that come slowly, and they are their own brand of traumatic, especially if it's for, the allegation that you've murdered a loved one, right?
Yeah.
It carries a different weight to it because it's like the agony and the humiliation on top of it. So, they let you walk in and you go through the metal detectors. They're not going to handcuff you, because you're turning yourself in.
Yeah.
At least they weren't going to handcuff me. They might have handcuffed me. I don't know if they assessed that I looked threatening in some other way.
True. That's
Um,
very true.
but, they patted me down. And at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to be put in a holding cell and I'm dressed nice for my court appearance and I've done my makeup and my hair looks good, because I'm trying to look presentable for the court. No, that
Yeah.
doesn't happen. You get strip searched, bend them and spread them. You've got to go take the shower,
Yes.
right, and be sprayed down with the disinfectant, and then you have to sit for your mugshot or stand for your mugshot, looking every bit a mess with wet hair. And you know that this is the image the public is going to see of you, um, and make their own judgments from that. And you're already in your orange jumpsuit, and there's no like bras, there's no
Yeah.
underwear.
Yeah.
Um, and then, you get put into, I was lucky enough to get put in medium security and not maximum because I was cooperative. And you go into your cell and you have a cellmate and you wait. Um,
Yeah.
you get out for breaks here and there, maybe 10 or 15 minutes at a time. But in general, it's a highly restricted and really intimidating environment because any move, either like to embrace someone or you're too talkative or you exercise in your cell, it depends on who the guard is. You can get threatened with lockdown or depoc. It's a very intense experience. And there's not a lot of access you have to, like, you have a pencil and you have your charges, right? They'll give you a piece of paper with what you've been charged with. You have your one phone call, which I made. Um, but you're there, and this is going to be your life for however long it takes. You don't know if you're going to make bond.
Like,
There are people that you're meeting who have been there for years because they didn't make $1,000 bond. There are people there who are still waiting to get their public defender. There are people who have basically lived their entire lives in and out of that cycle. In fact, 70% of people who are incarcerated in this country are incarcerated in pretrial detention. And that's in jails rather than prisons, right? And so it is a very frightening experience because you don't have clocks. You sort of lose your sense of time already just from a few hours. And everyone's telling you, oh, you've been charged with murder, that you're not going to get bond for that. This judge in this county, you're not going to get bond. And so you start mentally preparing yourself for the idea you could spend years here, even if you're never convicted of any crime.
I'm like, I know, just my thing is that what makes you so scared, like you're living your life
Yep.
on the outside, like on the rest, it's all free and clear. You're helping your mom,
Yep.
and now you're in a 4x4 cell, 2x2, whatever, with somebody you don't know,
Yeah.
and your freedom has been stripped.
Yes, and it may remain stripped. Even though, we have the standard of innocent until proven
Right?
guilty, the way that functions is very
Yes.
different looking.
Yes.
But I was very lucky because I had my bond hearing that afternoon. And in the bond hearing, dozens of people in my community, in my former community down in Georgia, people who came down from New York, showed up for me in that courtroom to vouch this is not a person who's going to try and flee. This is a
Okay.
person who's willing to stand trial, right? Because the bond hearing is to make sure you're not going to,
Yeah.
you know, flee. Do you need to be held in detention because you're a flight risk or not? Um, and that was also where we got some indication from the DA, who did not seem convinced of at least the malice murder part of the charge. She even said herself, I don't think there was any malice in this. I talked to
Yeah.
Marcia, my mom's siblings, and they said she was in a great deal of pain. And so it was interesting to hear the state sort of soften its tone. Now, mind you, she was not the DA who originally brought these charges. My charges had been brought by the investigator. He presented my case to the grand jury. She was the new interim DA. The previous DA actually left to go serve in DC beforehand. So she came onto my case sort of with fresh eyes,
Yes.
which was also a big asset in my case because she ended up doing some of her own digging too, to kind of, and those things sort of dispelled any notion that I had some sort of financial motive. For instance, she pulled my mom and my bank records and saw that,
Okay.
I was supporting, my
Nice.
mom's care, right?
Nice. You were paid
And
for it.
not, not doing any, paying for my mom's house to fix it up after her
Right.
death.
Right.
And and I think that instilled enough doubt that when, she was before the judge, she didn't fight bond. Usually a DA will fight bond.
Yeah. Yes.
But as a result, she didn't, and the judge granted me $200,000 bond.
Oh. So
Um,
folks, that's normally what, 10%?
yeah, yeah, actually no. Yeah, it's like 30.
So you're like, okay, I can get out, but I got to come up with
Or 15, sorry. It was 15, I think. So 30,000. Yeah. 15%. Sorry.
it's
Yep.
like,
It's an astronomical amount of money.
yes,
And for most people, right? And
right,
it was certainly for us, what made it astronomical is you're also paying for a criminal defense at this point. This
yes,
is not something most people can afford. For
nope,
us, who are white collar professionals in New
yeah,
York and who are middle aged and we had retirement savings,
okay, got it.
we had to basically drain all of our life savings. It's what cost do you put on your life? If I had been 20 years old and this had happened to me, forget it. I'd probably be still in detention. Um,
And that's the thing, folks. It's so not only mom ain't buried yet, right? She at this point she ain't buried.
well, no, she had been cremated. They did return her body after the initial autopsy. It's the
Okay,
toxicology takes a long time. So
but
yeah,
you haven't
she'd
had a
been
funeral or
cremated
anything,
before
right? Or did you have a
suspicious.
funeral by then?
We'd had a funeral. We, in fact, had a funeral just days after her death while I was under suspicion because I had to continue to function as normal, which was torturous.
Compartmentalization, I guess that's what we got to do. We got to learn
Yep.
how to do it. As humans, we can't do that sometimes. We have to learn how to compartmentalize, and you had to do that like at a 10th degree. My life, your husband, well, he's with you, right? Your husband.
Yes. In fact, gave up the passport too. And so my husband's an Alzheimer's researcher at NYU. And that was the other, thing I think that helped me when he spoke before the judge. The judge had an understanding that, I'm not someone who's a threat to society
Right,
or,
right.
my family and I, and there, there's no criminal, it was another thing working to my advantage. I had no criminal record and other people aren't as lucky, right?
We're not.
Um, and there were just a lot of things working in my favor, like even like forget like race or sex is a
Right.
different story. When women are charged with murder, there's an interesting women are actually at a little bit of a disadvantage
Okay.
when it's perceived that they may have killed a family member.
Okay.
But uh, privilege financially, ethnically, like in terms of my background, those factors all came into play.
Okay.
And I'm very acutely aware of that. And there was a very strong sense of knowing eventually I was going to have to speak about this as I was released from my cell. And I'm looking back at the people who were cheering for me and being supportive because they couldn't even make a smidge of the bond that I did to get out. And that really deepened my resolve in assuring myself that once I was clear, if I was able to be cleared, I would probably end up spending the rest of my life or however long it took to ensure this never happened to someone else again because they would not be as lucky as I was. Because being released on bond enabled me to go back to New York
Okay.
and gather all of that evidence I had rather than like relying on my husband's that go through like my laptop. And I mean, they had all my passwords anyway in case I wasn't released.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but I was able to get all of that together, get it to my attorney, and my attorney, was also getting discovery at the same time, right? Because we are now moving toward the process of having a murder trial. We I had said from the beginning there's no plea bargain that could possibly be on the table. That's how most people end up actually incarcerated in prison is through a
Right.
plea bargain agreement because I at this point had done enough research into the law that I knew there was absolutely no law whatsoever I had broken.
Okay.
Um, and so I had absolute confidence that if you are going to take me to trial, then I'm going to stand trial for the thing that I've been charged for, and we will let the public decide.
Okay.
But in the interim, we will give you all the evidence that we have, including all of our exculpatory evidence, and get that to the medical examiner who made the initial determination. Um, he found all kinds of things wrong with my mom, including she had acute, extensive liver necrosis, kidney failure, pneumonia, brainstem atrophy, 70% coronary blockage, and multiple myeloma lesions all throughout her brain and spine. She had many drugs in her system, and morphine was one of them. Um, and that would have been expected. And we don't know the exact reason why it was originally ruled a homicide due to morphine toxicity. That's something we're still trying to, understand.
Okay.
But we do know that when we presented him with evidence that we don't believe he had access before, or investigators had access to, including evidence showing that my mom had been declared actively dying before I came down,
Okay.
and that my mom had no food or fluids, which can change how morphine concentrates in the body, especially post-mortem. And that, you know, I had all of this footage of my mom as she was dying so he could see the condition of her body.
Okay.
It was long before any sort of administration from the comfort kit, as well as the prescription. We showed him that we had a prescription for
Okay.
morphine with the amount, because it was alleged that there was unauthorized morphine. And
Okay.
um, little do people know, when you're prescribed a comfort care kit, it is authorized at that point.
Clearly.
Technically,
Yeah.
there's no law that states it, right?
Right.
You have sort of a he said, she said. So if someone said it's unauthorized, law
Right.
enforcement will go with that, because they don't necessarily know any better.
Right.
But once he got all this information and the DA got all this information, her cause of death changed. It was no longer a homicide. And at that point, he'd ruled it undetermined, right? He's not going to make a determination outright of innocence. It has to,
Okay.
he has to work. He can't make the judgment, right, that a court could make potentially. And
Yes.
so we
Yes.
understand. So we don't know exactly what his personal opinion is, only that the finding was changed. And the DA also got all that evidence, though, and she immediately dropped all charges and requested for the case to be dismissed. There was no discussion of a plea bargain, anything like that. Um, and
You must have been like, I mean, well, dog, I'll also ask the question. What was it like for you? Because I'm only imagining there's, again, anger, now loss again.
yeah,
And
I lost my job,
there you
my
go.
reputation.
Yes.
I, at this point, I had lost everything except like my marriage and, my health. This is questionable, right? But I was working to hold on to that. Um, you've lost your life savings. Uh, and then you just get a phone call. It's like it's so unceremonious. Like, you've had to check in with Bond on your phone like every week, send your
Yeah.
selfie, show you're in the same place. You've given up your Fourth Amendment rights, right? You've given up your passport. I had to cancel, my honeymoon, right? Because we couldn't travel anymore. Got married while I was out on bond.
Oh my God.
Um, you you've lost so much, and suddenly you get a call that, okay, you're now back to being a private citizen again, and you're going to get a revised death certificate. And it's as though a lot of people expected me to be celebratory with
Right.
relief.
It's that
But I
getting
was
cut
like,
in.
I was like, my best analogy was, imagine you have a tumor and it's like right here. And over the course of a year and a half, it's growing a little bit, but most people are like, it's benign. Nothing's going to come of it. It's not, don't worry too much. And then one day it suddenly explodes in size and it's got huge ulcers and lesions. And you walk around and everybody sees this giant tumor on the side of your head all day, every day. You've been told it's probably going to kill you,
Right.
uh, or it might kill you, right?
Right.
At the very least, it's going to, take away your life as you know it. And you walk around with it for months, trying every treatment there is. And then one day you get a call. Congratulations. This tumor's not going to kill you at all. But the problem is you still have a tumor and it's giant and oozing and it has left, blood and pus and horror all
Yes.
over every aspect of your life. It
Yeah.
isn't just gone.
Right.
You now have immense PTSD.
Yes.
You walk by a cop,
Oh,
terror.
yes.
You watch a legal drama or someone being interrogated,
Yes.
terror. You contemplate the idea of a loved one getting sick and dying and you're with them, terror that
Yeah.
you might be accused again and no one will be there to save you or you haven't collected evidence this time.
Oh my God.
It's
Oh
very surreal.
God. It's crazy. It's crazy. This is crazy. Because again, I guess I keep saying, folks at home who are watching, listening to this, your life, you think you're doing everything above board, you're doing everything, and all of a sudden you're turned upside down in one of the worst ways that can happen, which is an arrest, to be accused. I mean, there's so much to unpack on that too.